There's a sentence people love to repeat whenever Modigliani comes up, because it sounds exactly like the kind of tragic, romantic thing an artist should have said. Amedeo Modigliani never painted eyes, they say, unless he truly loved the person. It's poetic, it's memorable, it's emotionally satisfying. And, like most perfect art history sentences, it's only half true. Which is precisely why it's survived. Because Modigliani isn't just an artist people look at, he's an artist people project onto. The drunk genius, the starving bohemian, the doomed lover, the misunderstood visionary who died young and became expensive. But here's the uncomfortable truth. None of these labels explain why his portraits still feel unsettling a century later. Why they refuse to settle into the background like most historical art, and why people who don't care about painting still stop scrolling when one of his faces appears on screen. This story isn't really about empty eyes, alcohol, or tragedy. It's about refusal. Refusal to decorate reality. Refusal to flatter the viewer. Refusal to explain inner life in a way that makes it easy. This is the story of Amedeo Modigliani, an artist who didn't want to be understood quickly, comfortably, or completely, and who may have understood something about modern identity long before the rest of the world caught up. Amedeo Modigliani was born in 1884 in Livorno, a port city in Italy, into a Jewish family that had once been comfortable but was already sliding toward financial instability. His childhood wasn't marked by dramatic poverty, but by a persistent sense of fragility, both economic and physical, that never really left him. From a young age, Modigliani was frequently ill, suffering from tuberculosis and other respiratory conditions that forced him into long periods of isolation. He read obsessively, drew constantly, and became deeply attuned to interior life long before he had language for it. He studied art formally in Italy, absorbing Renaissance traditions, classical proportions, and the idea that the human figure was the central subject of serious art. But even then, he struggled with authority. He respected tradition without trusting it, learning the rules carefully while quietly planning how to ignore them. In his early 20s, he moved to Paris, because Paris at the turn of the 20th century was where artists went when they wanted permission to fail loudly. The city was chaotic, crowded, intellectually violent, and creatively intoxicating. Poets insulted each other publicly. Movements rose and collapsed almost overnight. Modigliani lived hard. He drank heavily, used drugs, and cultivated the image of the reckless bohemian. But beneath that performance was relentless discipline. He drew constantly, filling notebooks with faces, bodies, and variations on the same forms, refining an aesthetic that most people around him couldn't quite understand. Recognition never came while he was alive. While contemporaries like Picasso and Matisse gained institutional support, Modigliani remained marginal, selling little, often trading paintings for meals or drinks, dismissed as too strange to categorize and too traditional to be revolutionary. He fell deeply in love with Jean Heboutel, a young art student who became both his partner and one of his most frequent subjects. They had a child together, lived in poverty, and watched Modigliani's health deteriorate rapidly. In 1920, at just 35 years old, Modigliani died of tubercular meningitis. 2 days later, Jean, 8 months pregnant, took her own life. That tragedy became inseparable from his legend, freezing his image forever as the doomed artist who never lived long enough to be understood. To understand why Modigliani struggled, you have to understand the world he lived in, because early 20th century Paris was obsessed with speed, novelty, and rupture. Art wasn't just changing, it was competing, loudly, aggressively, and publicly. Cubism shattered the human figure into geometry. Fauvism exploded color into violence. Abstraction questioned whether representation mattered at all. Every movement promised revolution, and every artist was expected to declare allegiance. Modern analogy? Imagine social media discourse, academic theory, and creative subcultures all colliding in one city, without filters, without moderation, and without anyone pretending to be polite. In that environment, Modigliani's work looked confusing. He wasn't destroying the human figure, but he wasn't honoring it either. He slowed it down, elongated it, simplified it, and stripped away detail until faces became quiet, almost solemn shapes. In a moment obsessed with shock, Modigliani chose restraint, and restraint rarely goes viral in its own time. Modigliani's first major contribution was a radical simplification of the human form that rejected both realism and abstraction without fully committing to either. His portraits are immediately recognizable. Elongated necks, narrow faces, sloping shoulders, and bodies that feel stretched rather than disordered, as if pulled slowly out of shape by time itself. This wasn't an accident, and it wasn't incompetence. Modigliani understood anatomy perfectly well. What he rejected was the idea that physical accuracy automatically produced emotional truth. A modern analogy would be lowering the resolution on an image, not because you don't know how to make it sharp, but because sharpness distracts from meaning. What they said, these people don't look real. What they meant, these people don't perform for us. His second major contribution involved the eyes, which became the most mythologized aspect of his work. Contrary to popular belief, Modigliani did paint eyes, sometimes fully, sometimes partially, sometimes asymmetrically, and sometimes not at all. This wasn't about love alone, nor was it a fixed rule. For Modigliani, eyes represented interior life, not physical presence. Leaving them blank wasn't an absence of effort. It was a refusal to claim access to someone's inner world. In an era that increasingly treated people as objects to be analyzed, categorized, and consumed, Modigliani introduced distance. What they said? He couldn't finish the eyes. What they meant? He didn't want to pretend he fully knew the person. His third major contribution was psychological tension. Modigliani's portraits don't invite intimacy. They resist it. The subjects are present but emotionally sealed, confronting the viewer without surrendering themselves. This discomfort is intentional. Modern comparison? These portraits feel like profile pictures that reveal nothing beyond mood, reminding us that visibility doesn't equal transparency. Here's the part that should make you uneasy. While Modigliani was alive, he was dismissed, ignored, and financially desperate. His work didn't change after his death. The only thing that changed was the audience. Today, those same portraits sell for tens, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars, hanging in climate-controlled rooms with guards and plaques explaining their importance. So, the question isn't whether Modigliani was good enough. The question is, how often we mistake discomfort for failure simply because we don't yet have language for what we are seeing. Modigliani mattered because he offered an alternative vision of modernity. He proved that progress in art didn't require destruction, speed, or spectacle. It could come from subtraction, silence, and restraint. Culturally, his work challenged the assumption that beauty should be comforting or pleasant. Artistically, he expanded portraiture beyond likeness into emotional presence, influencing generations of artists who wanted to represent identity without reducing it to surface detail. Historically, his career became a case study in how markets lag behind meaning, and how innovation often looks like failure before it looks like genius. Modigliani's influence is everywhere, even when his name isn't. In fashion illustration, editorial portrait photography, minimalist character design, and contemporary figurative painting, his aesthetic language persists quietly. Beyond art, his ideas resonate with modern psychology and therapy culture, which increasingly acknowledges that people are not fully readable and that interior life resists complete explanation. Internet culture understands this instinctively. The unreadable expression, the blank stare, the refusal to overshare. These are modern defenses against overexposure, and Modigliani explored them long before screens existed. Modigliani's life doesn't teach us that suffering creates great art. That myth is lazy and often harmful. What his story really shows is that clarity requires courage. He knew what he wanted to remove, what he didn't owe the viewer, and what he was unwilling to perform, even when the cost was obscurity. He didn't decorate pain or explain himself into acceptance, and the world punished him for that, until it didn't. Modigliani never wanted you to recognize his subjects completely. He wanted you to sit with the discomfort of not fully knowing them. So, here's the challenge. The next time something refuses to explain itself to you, resist the urge to dismiss it. It might be asking you to slow down.